according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
As Jesus came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what large stones and what large buildings." Then Jesus asked him, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left here upon another. All will be thrown down." When he was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will this be? And what will be the sign that all these things are about to be accomplished?" Then Jesus began to say to them, "Beware that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' and they will lead many astray. When you hear of wars and rumors of war, do not be alarmed. This must take place, but the end is still to come. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. This is but the beginning of the birth pains." The Gospel of Christ.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Your word, God, is life. Bring us to life. Amen. A mother goes to wake her son one Sunday morning to go to church. And he pulls the sheets over his head and yells to the bedroom door that he's not going. His mother states that he must. He says no, for 3 reasons. 1, he's not appreciated there. 2, it's full of hypocrites. 3, he's tired of it. His mother replies, he must indeed go for 3 reasons. 1, he's 45 years old. 2, it's his duty. And 3, he's the pastor. Well, I wonder if it was a Sunday like this one, today with apocalyptic readings, because end times are not nice to think about. And then we've got Hannah's depression too. Jesus was good at reading times, telling us like it is. He didn't beat around the bush or hide the truth from his disciples. He tells us, don't pull the sheets over your head in difficult times. Life is difficult. And when we are ready to accept that truth, it often no longer is. Jesus is inviting us to accept that there will be end times so we can start to appreciate and relax and fully live in the now times. No matter how big an obstacle such a passage seems, the bigger obstacle is our hearts closed to Jesus' good news. Hearts of stone are what God could not overturn save through the death of his Son. And so for the next few weeks, our readings present pictures of end times, war and famine and earthquakes, and difficult things, just as we're getting excited about Christmas and the celebration of Jesus' birth. So what is Jesus saying to us? Lately, you know I have a passion for music. I'm starting to enjoy country music. And our prayers will be, with Brian's help, literally the lyrics of Tim McGraw's beautiful song, Humble and Kind. Another song, Remember One, sung by Ellen Jackson. And I quote it, "Remember when I was young, and so were you, and time stood still, and love was all we knew. Remember when we vowed the vows and walked the walk, gave our hearts, made the start. It was hard. We lived and learned, life through curves. There was joy, there was hurt. Remember when life was changed, disassembled, rearranged. We came together, fell apart, and broke each other's hearts. Remember when we said when we turn gray, when the children grow up and move away, we won't be sad, we'll be glad for all the life we've had, and we'll remember when." Jesus sees how the disciples look with wonder at the temple, exclaiming, "Isn't it amazing? Isn't it grand?" And he shocks them. Instead of agreeing, he remembers when it was disassembled and disarrayed, as was Israel. The temple of Solomon was destroyed and people exiled, and stone by stone it had to be rebuilt, and also the lives of the people. And well, as Jesus spoke, this second temple, a little less grand than the first, but no less magnificent, will soon, only 2 years after Jesus' death, be deconstructed once again and demolished after 40 years reconstruction. Jesus is not trying to depress them or turn faith into disbelief. He is saying, look more closely. I bring good news in such times. It is a rhythm of life for stones and even bodies to tumble. Don't panic when things start to crumble. Be alert, expectant, and faithful, knowing that what you start in faith, I, your God, will finish in perfect love. Even if events seem as they did for Hannah, who was ridiculed cruelly by her husband's first wife, Peninnah, for not bearing him children as she did, Jesus says, hold fast to faith. It will bring to birth, as a pregnant mother does with her birth pains, everything that needs to be born. Hope in this and know that this is God's plan for you. Pain, anxiety, and depression and regret, they can really eat us up, leaving us with an unsettled ache. And in such a condition, Hannah wrote those words of lament, and her tears were not only from her eyes, they were from her soul. Hannah had a desire to be a mother. She lived in a time and a place when women were valued primarily for their capacity to bear children. That deep longing belonged to her. When our story opens from 1 Samuel, her longing has not been fulfilled, and she feels the burden of her situation. Reading this story, you feel her desperation. You see darkness and sadness and depression, and they're spiraling. Hannah lives with this unsettled ache. And this brings us to a threefold reality. Things tumble down. My car loves to remind me, and some of us with older cars, we enjoy talking about, is yours hanging in so far? What repairs have you had? Well, one repair for mine seems to lead to another. Yet I believe in this car and stay with it, and hope it will see me through the winter. Eventually my car will pass away. Even the new seniors complex looking bright and shiny right next to us. Even our beloved St. John's, appreciating that 2 more Anglican churches in this diocese close next week, which makes the number about 68 in 2 years. And one of them was the historic Bishop Cronin Church last week, church of the first bishop born in 1802 of our diocese. It closed its doors last week. So Jesus wants the disciples and you and I to be careful what we build our life on, our church on. Structures seem solid like stones, but they will pass away. Jesus said, heaven and earth as you understand them will pass away, but the truth of my teaching and my word will not pass away. And secondly, false promise and messiahs will come in your life. A vast smorgasbord of value systems, lifestyles will be sold to you. Competing ideologies will knock each other over to get to us. Be alert where you put your trust, your time, your heart. Stay focused, or you may wander and get lost. And the thirdly, as your life is being renewed and the kingdom, as it did for Hannah when she prayed in the temple to God, and the disciples, when their world fell apart at Christ's crucifixion, then resurrection and ascension, and so his second leaving, you will feel birth pains many times in your life. If you didn't know anything about childbirth, literally nothing, and you saw a woman groaning and struggling in labor, you would have no idea that all this is necessary for a wonderful new life to be born. And once born, the new life makes the birth pain worthwhile. And so it is for the birth of the kingdom of God. Life is sometimes difficult as a disciple, but the suffering and labor pains of the faithful lead to a new creation.
Preparing for a bazaar, it's a lot of work. And while it is fun, it can be challenging too. But once we see how happy people are to be there, and how we are raising funds to keep this wonderful house of God thriving in ministry, providing heat for those who come in out of the cold, and programs and worship, and a minister who among many of you can offer comfort and counsel and prayers with you. Even Jesus' death, it looked like God forsaking his son, but these were the birth pangs to open even the gates of hell, to let out those who were confined. His resurrection makes us look differently on Good Friday. Some years ago, shortly after being married, my husband and I entered the world of mortgages and a new home. We decided to make an investment, a big investment, in our home and build these massive stone retaining walls extending the full length of our property to hold up the hill upon which our house is perched. These walls are over 100 feet long and probably 25 feet high, but they're in 3 tiers. It took a team of 3 stonemasons 3 months to hand hew and fit the stones to make the tiered walls. Many times we second-guessed ourselves at outlaying such a large quantity of money for these foundational stones. But when all was done, it was beautiful, and the gardens they held were breathtaking. We would happily work into the future to pay for these permanent stones. But over time, and not much time, they started to bolt and shift under gravity and needed rebuilding. Then vandals started to smash and tear parts down after a Saturday night of heavy drinking, over and over again in the last years. Vandals have literally made a project to tear down almost the entire lower level and shaken not only our faith in their permanence, but our faith in some of the people who make up our community. Frequently, while catching up on gardening or hands-on-stone refitting ourselves, a garden truck would stop and the driver come out and shake his head and say, "I'll remove all these stones and give you bigger stones, ones that can't be torn down." "Thank you," I said, "but no thank you. Knowing even still I am not prepared just yet to invest, or can, another penny in those walls." And I think this is a testimony to the tearing down that is part of the fabric of our life, our world, our nation, tornadoes or floods or droughts. And in the midst of our efforts to build up our lives, our home, society, Jesus has good news. Apocalyptic times, which literally mean times of shaking, which also, by the way, happened to my house 7 years ago through massive construction in the underground pipes. So you would wake up like this at 3 a.m. and it would be like the chains in Marley rattling the whole house. The Lord said to the disciples, "How can you worry about end times?" The disciples said to the Lord, "How can you worry about end times? Look at how unshakable Herod's temple is." The World Trade Center towers were tall and majestic, but they were destroyed in a single terrible morning. The Great Wall of China failed to keep out those who invaded, just as Hadrian's Wall failed to keep the Scots out. And similarly, the walls the Israelis are building through the middle of Palestinian territory will not bring peace to the Middle East. Nor will the wall the U.S. is building on the Mexican border to bring an end to the strife, will bring an end to the strife that leads to immigrants needing to flee across these borders. The Great Pyramids of Central America were marvelous feats of engineering, but when the Mayan civilization fell, the jungle overtook the pyramids. Our trust in anything less than the strategies Jesus proclaims, peacemaking, loving one's enemies, forgiving and healing, will not stand. The gospel is good news, for there is grace, and there is hope for Hannah, who has her son, and for us, who find tearing down bad news and sometimes a distraction of misguided startups slow down the birth pangs of the true rebuilding. But the good news is what is an ending Jesus makes into a beginning. And this kingdom is built on Jesus Christ, the cornerstone. and it cannot crumble. No external force can shake it apart, and you are a citizen of that kingdom. In the end, the one thing necessary is to let Christ's love enter you and then let it flow out of you to others. And I see that happening here, and it's wonderful. This is God's plan for each one of us. I want to end by just quoting Marcus Borg, who wrote a book called Convictions, How I Learned What Matters Most. Convictions was his last one. It was published just before he died at the age of 72. He died from a pulmonary fibrosis. He begins to reflect on that milestone. He says, turning 70 has not been grim. He says that turning 60 was much harder. He felt very old at 60 and very young at 70. Why? Because at 70, he felt primarily gratitude. He didn't take for granted anything. There's a word, a Cajun French word, that means something extra. Like when we were young, the cherry on top of the fudge sundae. It might be for us now, reading an incredible book, a glass of wine, a fire, a conversation with a friend, walking with God through every day. At 70, he said, life is too short to spend even an hour feeling preoccupied or grumpy or out of sorts. And so I'd like to close with this lovely reflection by Jane Kenyon as well when she turned 70. It's this. When I turned 50, I had a big party. Nope, that's not part of it. Here we go. I got out of bed on 2 strong legs. It might have been, no, it was the beginning. When I turned 50, I had a big party. When I turned 70, I got out of bed on 2 strong legs. It might have been otherwise. I ate cereal, sweet milk, ripe, flawless peach. It might have been otherwise. I took the dog uphill to the birch wood. All morning, I did the work I love. At noon, I lay down with my mate. It might have been otherwise. We ate dinner together at a table with silver candlesticks. It might have been otherwise. I slept in a bed with paintings on the walls and planned another day just like this day. But one day, I know it will be otherwise. Let us pray. May we not, Lord, take for granted end times. They're always a breath away. And in the midst of that breath is your love and grace and this beautiful world for us to live and cherish, enjoy, and by your love, transform. Amen.